Darkcast Network. Indie pods with a dark side.
Hi, I'm Ashley, a true crime fanatic. We host Fuck That, a true crime podcast that covers cases that highlight important topics that are often overlooked, such as wrongful convictions, domestic violence, and social inequities, sprinkled in with the occasional case with spooky themes. If you are looking for your next true crime fix delivered candidly with a hint of sarcasm, you can listen and subscribe to bi-weekly episodes of Fuck That wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to give us a follow on Facebook and Twitter at @FThatPod and at @FThat_pod on Instagram.
Hey, I'm your best friend and your worst influence, but I think that's why you like me. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors, and welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ. I'm on the socials just about everywhere as Rainbow Crimes and Darkcast Network. Join my Patreon at the unicorn level and get early release episodes, ad-free episodes, and I'll name a unicorn in your honor. Also, at the end of every month when everything is low or out, we'll take our unicorns out for a ride and I'll tell you a story that I haven't shared here on the show. Just when you think you ran out of everything at the end of the month, here comes CJ with an extra story for you. It's called a Patreon exclusive episode for members only. And right now, I'd like to give a shout out to my friend and Rainbow Warrior, Jamie B, for becoming my newest patron. Jamie, in the Seabreeze Studio stables sits your gorgeous silver-maned unicorn named Glimmer. I'm excited because in just a few days, Jamie B and Glimmer will be joining us on our Patreon member exclusive ride. Well, my orange kitty Lily isn't getting any better. She's 17 years old. Her sister Callie is the same age, but she looks and acts so much younger, almost like a kitten sometimes. But I've been bringing Lily downstairs in the evening to sit on the couch with Callie, my dog Nilla, and I for family time. It mostly consists of them sleeping and me playing Call of Duty. I doubt any of them really get anything out of it, but it brings me some joy. And they are really good listeners when Callie isn't interrupting me. I really should find more humans in my life, I guess. I'd like to call attention to a man who went missing on November 30th, 2021 from the Los Angeles area. I was kind of hoping to do a whole episode on him, but I haven't been able to really connect with his fiancée or his mom. 39-year-old Bo Man had last spoken to his fiancée Jason right before he went to bed on November 29th. The following day, Bo was seen being dropped off by an Uber at a 7-Eleven convenience store on Ventura Boulevard. After making his purchases, he left 7-Eleven at 2:06 according to the surveillance cameras. With him, he had his backpack, a bag of ice, and whatever he bought at 7-Eleven. Bo got into another Uber, and shortly he made a text to 911, and the text only read that he was in an Uber. That's the very last anyone has heard from Bo. I know I have a good amount of Los Angeles and surrounding area listeners, and now I'm going to ask probably for the impossible, but if you could please think back to November 30th, 2021, were you at or near a 7-Eleven on Ventura Boulevard? If so, did you see anything that didn't quite set right with you? Do you live in the LA area, and have you had some weird vibes with an Uber driver? If so, I urge you to contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS. That's 1-800-222-8477. And you can do so anonymously. Bo is kind of a big deal in the world. He developed an app called Sober Grid. When he was younger, he struggled with substance abuse. And what Sober Grid does is find you support 24/7 if you're on that journey to stay sober. I'll keep you posted should I hear anything more about this case. I remember when I was a kid, my older brother, who was 10 years older than me, he'd introduce me to all kinds of music. from what was called new wave back then to punk to classic rock and alternative bluesy music. He even introduced me to a little bit of country. It was a gift he gave me that I passed on to my daughter as she was growing up. My brother even bought me my first vinyl records, which I wish I still had. I lost my brother in 2018, the month before my daughter and I moved to Hawaii. We almost didn't move because of it. But then we decided he was excited for us to move to Hawaii, and I had just bought a house there, and escrow had already closed. What my brother taught me was that most songs are musical stories, and that lesson made me pay much more attention to lyrics of songs, which is probably why I'm not a fan of metal or opera. Metal to me is just screaming, and opera, well, it might have words, but I don't understand them. One of the most impactful songs my brother introduced me to had a crazy story behind it. The song is I Don't Like Mondays by the Irish rock group Boomtown Rats. The words didn't make a ton of sense to me until my brother explained the story behind it. I don't know if you've ever heard this song or the story behind it, but I'm going to read you some of the lyrics. The silicone chip inside her head gets switched to overload, and nobody's going to go to school today. She's going to make them stay at home. And Daddy doesn't understand it. He always said she was good as gold. And he can see no reasons, 'cause there are no reasons. What reason do you need to be shown? Tell me why. I don't like Mondays. I want to shoot, the whole day down. The telex machine is kept so clean and it types to a waiting world. Her mother feels so shocked, father's world is rocked, and their thoughts turn to their own little girl. Sweet 16, ain't that peachy keen? Now it ain't so neat to admit defeat. They can see no reasons 'cause there are no reasons. What reasons do you need? Tell me why I don't like Mondays. I want to shoot, the whole day down. Down, down, shoot it all down. And all the playing stopped in the playground now. She wants to play with the toys a while. And the school's out early and soon we'll be learning, and the lesson today is how to die. And the bullhorn crackles and the captain tackles with problems and the hows and whys. And he can see no reasons 'cause there are no reasons. What reason do you need to die? And the chorus goes on with tell me why I don't like Mondays. When I first heard it, I thought it was a really pretty song. My brother then told me it was about a girl who opened fire on an elementary school campus. I believe it was actually the very first school shooting I had ever heard of in my lifetime. I know there's been others before it, but this was my first to ever hear about one. 16-year-old Brenda Spencer lived across the street from Grover Cleveland Elementary School in a suburb of San Diego County called San Carlos. She was a petite girl with stringy red hair. A classmate described her as pretty crummy looking. It would seem Brenda's attitude matched her appearance. People who knew her, and I won't call them friends because Brenda didn't have many of those. They said she would often talk shit about the police and shooting one someday. Her teachers said she was quiet and shy, so much so they sometimes had to ask if she was awake in class. One thing that Brenda really did excel at was photography. She'd even won a first prize in a Humane Society contest. Brenda was born on April 3rd, 1962 to Wallace and Dot Spencer. She's an Aries. And I don't mean to be offensive to any Aries folks out there, but I've not had a good track record with Aries women. I don't think me and Brenda would get along very well. As a child, Brenda had fallen off her bicycle and sustained an injury to her front temporal lobe of her brain. She would get epileptic seizures occasionally from the fall. We know sometimes these types of injuries can cause people to act inappropriately, even violent, even deadly. We've seen this in famous serial killers such as Richard Ramirez, David Berkowitz, Ed Gein, and John Wayne Gacy. Brenda's parents had separated, and Brenda, along with her siblings Teresa and Scott, ended up living with their dad, Wallace. But eventually it was just Brenda who stayed with her dad. When Brenda was around the age of 5, a little girl next door tried to befriend Brenda, but Brenda took this little girl's doll and she tore the head off of it. This quickly ended any type of friendship forming between her and this little girl. Inside the home Wallace and Brenda lived in, the word poverty-stricken came to mind when I read that they shared a mattress laying on the floor of their living room. And actually, the word poverty was followed up quickly by the word inappropriate. That came to mind, especially after Brenda came into puberty. Brenda would later claim she was sexually abused by her dad from the age of 9 all the way through the age of 16. I really have a hard time not believing that there's truth in that. Wallace was a heavy drinker, and this was apparent from all of the empty whiskey and beer bottles just laying around the house. In December of 1978, Brenda would ask her dad for a radio for Christmas. She loved violent punk rock songs, and she'd spend hours scribbling down the lyrics to them. But instead, her dad, who was a gun enthusiast, bought Brenda a .22 caliber shotgun with a telescopic sight and hundreds of rounds of ammo. Way to parent, Wallace. How about a fucking mattress of her own instead? If he could afford her a shotgun and all of his guns and whiskey and beer, this Packer Rod should have been able to get the girl her own damn mattress to sleep on in her own damn room. I'm sorry, Warriors, this just really bugs me. And it adds fuel to my fire that she was sexually abused. I might be an LGBTQ advocate, but I also hold children and animal rights near and dear to my heart. Had this child been raised differently, better, she most likely would have come out a much kinder human being. I truly believe this case to be nurture over nature. And I haven't even got to the crimes yet, but I'm sure you can all see where this is leading. Oftentimes, Brenda would be truant from school. She just didn't feel like going. Towards the end of January 1979, Brenda did go to school. And she told a classmate she planned on doing something soon to get on television. Something that would make her famous. But she never really alluded as to what. About a week later, on Monday, January 29, 1979, Brenda woke up. She told her father she was too sick to go to school that day. Her father didn't question it, and he left for work around 7 a.m. Brenda then took her epilepsy pill and she washed it down with whiskey. On top of alcohol consumption, Brenda also dabbled in drug use. She spent the next hour drinking alcohol and doing drugs. At least that's what she told the police later, although no sign of alcohol or drugs were ever evident in her toxicology report. Across the street from her home, she was watching the elementary school children being dropped off by their parents around 8 a.m. They stood outside and they waited for their principal to open up the gates of the school so they could go to the playground and await class to start. At 8:30, the last of the children were arriving for school, and that's when Brenda opened a window to her house that was facing Grover Cleveland Elementary School. Brenda preloaded her Christmas present, and she began to shoot across the street. She hit 9-year-old Monica Selvig in the wrist. 53-year-old Principal Burton Regg, he heard the gunfire and immediately he went outside to herd the children to safety. He ran over to a group of kids and he was shot in his heart, killing him instantly. The custodian on duty was 56-year-old Michael Sukar. He rushed to the principal's side and he too was shot and killed. Michael was a veteran and he'd survived World War II, only to be murdered by a 16-year-old girl on what was supposed to be peaceful, friendly homeland. 9-year-old Cam Miller was shot in his back. The bullet went out his chest, missing his heart by inches. Children were screaming and crying and falling to the ground. 9-year-old Christy Buell was shot in her abdomen, as were at least 3 other children. 28-year-old police officer Robert Robb arrived on the scene. He was shot in his neck. After 15 minutes and 30 rounds of ammunition being unloaded into the front of this elementary school, A quick-thinking police officer obtained a garbage truck and pulled it in front of the school, blocking Brenda's view of any more people on the school campus. A SWAT team was assembled and it arrived on the scene. Some were helping to evacuate the children through the back of the school, and the others surrounded Brenda's house. The kids who had been shot were carried to safety and tended to by teachers. That was until ambulances could come and take them to the hospital. A 6.5-hour standoff ensued. The commander of SWAT was able to entice Brenda out with an offer of food. She wanted Burger King. But before she came out of her house, a reporter for the San Diego Evening Tribune got on the phone. He started to call surrounding houses in the neighborhood, trying to get information on the school shooting. As it would happen, he called Brenda's house. Brenda answered and informed him the shooter was a 16-year-old girl, and she gave him her address. The reporter then realized he was speaking to the shooter, and he asked her, "What's your motive?" She said, "I don't like Mondays. This livens up the day." For who, Brenda? Surely not the children or the police officer you injured, and definitely not for the 2 men you killed. Brenda then told the reporter, "I have to go now. I shot a pig," she meant police officer, "and I think I want to shoot more." The year prior to the Cleveland Elementary School shooting, Brenda was arrested for burglary. And get this, at the time she had a BB gun her dad had given her, and she was shooting the windows out of classrooms at Cleveland Elementary School. And yet, her dear old dad thought it was a good idea to buy Brenda a real gun. Was he really that fucking dense? Or was he just trying to set her up for failure? Really kind of makes you wonder. When Brenda stood down for her Burger King meal, she immediately was arrested, and she was taken into custody. Law enforcement was amazed that she still had hundreds of rounds of ammunition available to her in the house. Brenda could have went on for days with the standoff, had that whopper not lured her out. While in custody, she told the police the kids and the school staff, they were easy targets. At trial, she was tried as an adult. She pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and multiple counts of assault with a deadly weapon. Brenda was sentenced to 25 years to life. Her first parole hearing was in 1993 and she was denied. She's had several since and she's been denied every time. Brenda turned 55 in Chino Correctional Facility in California. Once she had her 55th birthday, she became a member of the Golden Girls, and I hate it that they named it that. But the prison's Golden Girls is a program that offers perks to whoever turns 55 and older. Brenda was able to get a pass to be first in line in meals. She got 2 mattresses instead of a standard one. Damn, Brenda, you live in large with 2 mattresses, and you don't have to share either with your dad. She got 2 pillows and a coveted bottom bunk. Brenda still maintained she was abused by her dad. She even said that the falling off the bicycle story was what her dad made her tell people. She then said what really happened was he kicked her in the head and gave her the brain injury. She was up again for parole in 2021, but she waived it until September of 2022. In an article I found dated November 22nd, 2022, Brenda is still incarcerated. She'll be 61 years old in April. I sort of think that when someone is imprisoned at such a young age and they spend so many years behind bars, it becomes their way of life and they don't really want to leave. Brenda got the fame she desired so much, and she never seemed remorseful for her acts. I'll bet if you asked her today if her brief time in the spotlight was worth taking 2 lives and most likely giving 9 others PTSD, Brenda would say, "Livens up the day." Our true crime quickie this episode comes to us from Idaho. Idaho. No, Idaho. Idaho, I say. Sorry, I don't have a co-host, so I have to banter with myself sometimes. Okay, Idaho. The year was 2016, and 49-year-old Stephen Nelson was looking for love one night. He answered an ad put on the now defunct and seized by the feds Backpage website. The ad was for a male escort. The ad showed a heavily tattooed man with his face covered. The ad was bait. Bait to reel in gay men and rob them. Stephen unfortunately fell for this bait and he was reeled in. The man behind the picture in the hook that pulled Stephen in was a 23-year-old Idaho resident named Kelly Schneider. Kelly met Stephen at night in a Walmart parking lot in Nampa, Idaho. From there, Kelly would leave with Stephen and drive Stephen to Gotts Point. This is the place Kelly promised Stephen a romantic sexual encounter. Gotts Point is an area on Lake Lowell, and it sits between Nampa and Caldwell. To get off track just a little bit, Gotts Point is said to be haunted. The spirit who haunts is thought to be a little girl who drowned while water skiing back in the 1970s. There are multiple accounts of witnesses who were there at night and they say they hear a little girl gasping for air. It's so sad. So Kelly and Stephen arrived at Gotts Point, and soon thereafter 3 other men showed up. Jason Woods, Daniel Henkel, and Kevin Tracy. One of the men had a rifle. They forced Stephen's clothes off, and when he was naked, Kelly began to hit and kick Stephen, calling him homophobic slurs. Kelly was also wearing steel-toed boots. After beating Stephen senseless and leaving him for dead, the 4 men stole Stephen's car, his clothes, his wallet, and then they took off. Naked, Stephen walked a mile to a house for help. He was barely clinging to life. At the hospital, Stephen would die due to cardiac arrest as a result from his beating injuries. Before Stephen died, he was able to tell police about the men who assaulted him, and the Backpage ad he answered. Kelly was identified through his tattoos, and he was brought in for questioning, and then he was arrested. The other 3 men were also picked up and arrested. Jason Wood was declared the mastermind behind the whole roll and rob a gay man plan. Kevin Tracy sang like a canary when he was brought in. He told the police about the whole crime. The 4 men had to go to federal court for their trials, as their crime was covered under the Matthew Shepard, James Byrd Hate Crime Prevention Act. Kelly Schneider, the one who committed almost the whole assault on Stephen, he took a plea deal, and he pleaded guilty to violently assaulting a gay man, resulting in his death. The plea deal was to avoid a life sentence. In return, he received 336 months in prison. And you don't have to get your calculators out. I already did the math. That's 28 years with an added 5 years of supervised release. The supposed puppet master of this group, 28-year-old Jason Wood, he received 23 years to life for murder and conspiracy to commit robbery. Jason, who also apparently partook in sex work, had another 5 years tacked on for that, making his sentence 28 years. 21-year-old Kevin, who was the one who came clean about all that happened during Stephen's attack. Well, this guy's 6'10", but he has learning disabilities. It's believed he was coerced by his older brother, who happens to be Jason Wood. Investigators felt Kevin was simple and naive, and because Kevin told the investigators everything, they believed he just stood by and watched. He also testified against the other men, and he didn't receive a very harsh punishment. On the stand, he tearfully said he knew it was wrong, and he continued that he wasn't testifying to get his brother in trouble. He was testifying for Stephen's family, and he knew it was the right thing to do. Kevin was sentenced to 6 months in jail and 10 years probation. He told the court he was truly sorry and it should have never happened. The final man was 24-year-old Daniel Henkel. He was also cooperative with law enforcement. And because of this, his charges were lowered from first-degree murder to 1 count of felony aiding and abetting a robbery. Daniel also didn't partake in the beating of Stephen. Instead, he hid behind a bush with a lead pipe in his hands. It would seem Daniel had met Stephen once before, not long before this attack, and Daniel knew from that one meeting that Stephen was a great guy. At his trial, Daniel also cried and said he should have done something to help Stephen, and he was sorry for his cowardly actions. Daniel's testimony was key to putting away Kelly and Jason. Daniel is currently still incarcerated until April of 2036. Rest in power, Stephen. Love you, Rainbow Warriors. Remember, you matter. And it's not a crime to be gay. Unless you're a murderer.